2:03 hours on October 22, 2025, over Mordovia, Russia, 48 Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles closed in on the Saransk mechanical plant. The facility was manufacturing the very anti-personnel mines that had been choking Ukrainian advances across the Donbass. Russian commanders would soon discover why their most sophisticated air defense doctrine was about to become their greatest weakness. The Krasuka-4 electronic warfare system roared to life, pumping out a 500-watt wall of jamming energy across every known global positioning system frequency. For any standard drone relying on satellite navigation, the mission would have ended right there. The Russian operators believed they had just won the engagement before it even began. They were catastrophically wrong. These Ukrainian drones weren't running on standard software. Ukrainian engineers had installed custom firmware that, upon detecting a complete global positioning system blackout, immediately switched to alternative navigation logic. The Aeroeco-400 Scythe drone's artificial intelligence Skynode system instantly began comparing the live camera feed against a preloaded satellite map, navigating by recognizing roads, tree lines, and riverbeds. You can jam a satellite signal, but you cannot jam the planet Earth itself. The entire swarm, all 48 drones, flew on completely unbothered, hugging the terrain at 40 feet to stay under the long-range radar curtain. This wasn't improvisation. This was surgical execution of a pre-planned contingency that Russian intelligence had never anticipated. At 2:06 hours, 10 miles out, the Phantom Shift maneuver kicked in. 44 decoy drones screamed upward to 1,000 feet, and the Pantsir surface-to-air missile defense system operator's screen exploded with contacts. He was facing an impossible equation. His system could track dozens of targets simultaneously, but the Pantsir can only engage 4 targets at a time. This wasn't a flaw. It was a fundamental limitation of the missile guidance architecture that Ukrainian intelligence had studied for months. 5 seconds later, the first volley of 12 9M335 missiles launched. Each projectile accelerated to Mach 3.5, creating 12 streaks of light that vaporized 12 decoy drones in midair. It was a perfect 100% kill rate. It was also exactly what the Ukrainians wanted. The critical weakness of the Pantsir system isn't its accuracy. It's its limited magazine of ready-to-fire missiles. The system carries 12 missiles in its launch tubes, and after firing, it relies on a support vehicle for a frantic mechanical reload. Ukraine wasn't attacking the Pantsir's radar, they were attacking its endurance, its ammunition capacity, its fundamental logistical constraint. At 2:06 hours and 27 seconds after a frantic reload, the second volley of 12 missiles ripped through the sky. Another 12 decoys were destroyed. The Pantsir had now fired 24 missiles and destroyed 24 targets with flawless accuracy. The problem was it had 48 missiles in its total combat load, and it had just used half of them to destroy approximately $720,000 worth of plywood frames and cheap commercial electronics. The tactical display flashed the message the Ukrainians were counting on. Ammunition depleted, reload cycle initiated. It was a fatal 60-second pause. During that 60-second window, the remaining 24 drones, 20 decoys, and the 4 real attackers still glued to the thermal shadow of a civilian supply truck closed the distance to just 5 miles. The Pantsir was out of the fight. You think that truck's presence was a coincidence? Not remotely. The planning for this moment had begun weeks in advance. Ukraine's main Directorate of Intelligence had mapped Russia's radio frequencies, learned their call signs, memorized their security protocols, and determined the usual 200-hour shift change schedule and exactly which supply truck would arrive each night. This was the operational backbone of the entire strike. As the truck approached the main gate, the stage was set. At 2:08 hours, the swarm hit the factory's 3rd defensive layer, steel netting and electronic sensors. The steel netting was designed to either snag a propeller or trigger the warhead's contact fuse prematurely. An explosion 30 feet away from the building is a nuisance. An explosion inside is a catastrophe. The net was designed to guarantee the former. Working with the net are automated infrared sensors that detect heat signatures. A drone's electric motor and lithium polymer battery generate a distinct thermal signature against the cool night background. But Ukrainian intelligence had spent weeks analyzing satellite imagery and found predictable vulnerabilities. The netting had a gap around the main vehicle gate. The infrared sensors were cheap commercial-grade models with a well-known weakness: fog. Dense morning fog blinded them, scattering a drone's tiny heat signature until detection became impossible. This wasn't luck. It was a pre-calculated vulnerability. Ukrainian meteorologists had been tracking for days, waiting for the right weather conditions. The 20 remaining decoy drones now performed their final sacrificial act. Their job was to create a crisis the Russian guards were trained to expect. while the real infiltration happened in a way they could never anticipate. At 2:09 hours, the decoys charged directly at the Rosgvardia patrol positions from multiple vectors. The perimeter erupted into chaos. 60 National Guard troops opened up with everything they had. Machine gun tracers stitched the night sky. A Verba shoulder-fired missile, its infrared seeker confused by the swarm of small targets, screamed uselessly into the fog before detonating harmlessly. For 60 seconds, every Russian defender was looking up, completely fixated on the aerial swarm they believed was the main assault. And right into that storm of confusion, the mission commander back in Kyiv, watching the chaos unfold on his tactical display, performed his single most critical manual action. He keyed his microphone, patched into the captured Rosgvardia frequency, and broadcast the perfectly timed message in perfect Russian. New shift stuck at the gate. Traffic's a mess from this attack. Open up. We're on a tight schedule and command is screaming at us. The guard at the gate, his brain overloaded with screeching alarms, sustained gunfire, and drones being engaged overhead, heard a routine, slightly annoyed radio call using correct authentication protocols. He made the fatal but entirely human error. He connected the dots in the way humans instinctively do under stress. The attack was causing a traffic jam for the shift change. He could see the familiar truck's headlights cutting through the fog. He hit the button. As the steel gate slid open, the 4 real Aeroeco-400 drones, still perfectly masked by the truck's radar and thermal signature, slipped through like ghosts. They were inside the machine, invisible among the chaos. At 2:10 hours, the Quick Reaction Force arrived. 3 Tiger mine-resistant ambush, protected armored vehicles, and a Zhushka 232 anti-aircraft cannon mounted on a Ural 4320 truck. Sirens wailing. They were exactly 30 seconds too late. The gunner on the Zhushka 232 spun his turret desperately. But his weapon, a marvel of 1960s Soviet engineering, needed approximately 10 seconds to slew the heavy barrels and calculate a firing solution. The 4 Phantom drones were already inside the perimeter, their onboard artificial intelligence using thermal imaging to lock on to the main munitions warehouse. Their terminal guidance lock took 50 milliseconds. The gunner slammed his controls, the twin barrels grinding around. A torrent of 23mm tracers ripped through the air. A desperate attempt to create a wall of steel between the drones and their target, but he was shooting at Phantoms. The drones were in their terminal dive, accelerating and correcting their trajectory in milliseconds, making micro-adjustments that no human gunner could track. The gunner managed to track the 4th drone for a fraction of a second. He fired. The stream walked across the night sky just behind the drone's tail. A near miss. Close enough to see, too far to matter. At 2:11 hours, the first Scythe drone slammed into the northwestern corner of Building 7. The final assembly and main storage hall, holding tens of thousands of fully assembled anti-personnel and anti-tank mines ready for shipment. The drone's 25-pound warhead wasn't designed for a simple blast. It was a shaped charge, optimized for structural penetration. The hardened nose cone punctured the corrugated steel wall before the main charge detonated, ensuring the explosion occurred within the structure. This initial blast unleashed a supersonic overpressure wave, a physical wall of force moving at 300 pounds per square inch. This shockwave hammered the steel casings of thousands of adjacent TM-89 anti-tank mines. At the same instant, intense heat superheated the explosive filler inside those mines, pushing the temperature past their critical safety threshold. The result wasn't a slow chain reaction, it was near instantaneous sympathetic detonation. The entire northern half of the warehouse, approximately 40,000 square feet, erupted in a single seamless blast that registered on seismic monitors 80 kilometers away. 3 seconds later, the second drone hit Building 4, the fuse and igniter assembly line. This wasn't about a massive explosion, it was industrial decapitation. Volatile chemical precursors ignited, turning a precision mechanics workshop into a chemical inferno. The temperature reached 1800 degrees Celsius, melting the computer numerical control machines and precision tooling that represented decades of industrial investment. Then the 3rd and 4th drones executed the final, most brutal step. They flew directly into the already burning southern section of Building 7. These weren't redundant strikes. They were designed to feed the inferno. The impacts ripped the structure open, allowing a massive influx of oxygen that turned the raging fire into a self-sustaining firestorm, a convective engine of destruction that no fire department could approach. The strategic fallout from this operation is a 4-layer catastrophe for Moscow. First, the immediate military impact. A full 70% of the facility, including assembly lines and primary storage halls containing an estimated 150,000 ready-to-ship mines, was either vaporized or rendered structurally unsound. In corporate terms, this is a $100 million capital asset write-off. Russia didn't just lose a shipment, they lost the factory itself. Second, the logistical nightmare. The Saransk plant was the heart of a just-in-time delivery system for the Donbass front. That artery has been severed. For at least 6 months, Russia must reroute its entire mine supply chain through secondary facilities deep in Siberia. This adds weeks to delivery times and an estimated $2 million per month in premium logistics costs. Russian generals can no longer carpet the front lines with mines. They must ration them, making hard choices about which sectors deserve mine barriers, creating predictable weaknesses Ukrainian intelligence can exploit. Third, the psychological collapse. As the Kremlin issued its predictable statement about a technical incident involving careless smoking, the truth was already viral on Telegram with video footage. For Mordovia, citizens told the war was distant, the illusion of safety shattered. But the real target was the Russian soldier in his trench, told his homeland is an impenetrable fortress, now watching videos of the heartland burning. The unspoken contract that he fights to keep the war away from home has been broken. His morale takes a direct hit. Fourth, the doctrinal dilemma. This attack created an impossible strategic choice for the Russian general staff. For 2 years, they prioritized protecting field armies with dense air defense near the front. The Saransk strike proved that doctrine obsolete. Moscow was forced to choose, protect the troops or protect the war machine that supplies them. They chose the war machine, pulling an estimated 50 Pantsir systems from forward positions to guard critical infrastructure hundreds of miles from fighting. In doing so, they created a 100-mile-wide gap in battlefield air defense, a formal invitation for Ukrainian strike aircraft and long-range missiles to systematically dismantle Russian command posts and artillery positions. Ukraine spent $1.4 million on 48 drones. In return, they inflicted $100 million in direct damages, crippled a critical supply line for 6 months, shattered the Kremlin's propaganda narrative, and forced their enemy to weaken its own front line. That's a 7,000% return on investment. But this wasn't the only attack that night. 500 miles southeast in Makhachkala, Dagestan, 2 Luti long-range attack drones executed another precision strike, cruising at 30,000 feet over the Caspian Sea. They stayed below radar horizon for 90% of their journey. Their target wasn't an entire facility, but a single 200-foot-tall catalytic cracking tower, the irreplaceable equipment that converts crude oil into high-grade naval fuel for the Caspian flotilla. Armed with thermobaric warheads, the first drone turned the entire structure into a massive fuel-air bomb, creating an inferno that ruptured nearby storage tanks and sent a fireball 400 feet into the night sky. This wasn't 2 separate attacks. This was a single, brilliantly orchestrated operation, a classic 1-2 punch. The Saransk strike was the body blow, attacking Russia's future capability to produce mines for defensive positions. The Makhachkala strike was the knockout shot, attacking Russia's present capability, degrading a naval fleet actively firing Kaliber cruise missiles at Ukrainian cities. One strike suffocates the supply chain, the other suffocates the trigger puller. This combined operation forces complete strategic recalculation for Moscow. The Kremlin's entire defense posture was built on the myth of impenetrability that its prized S-400 and Pantsir systems created an air defense bubble no adversary could pierce. On the night of October 22, 2025, Ukraine didn't just pierce that bubble with luck. They proved it doesn't exist. They demonstrated that even Russia's most sophisticated air defense systems have fundamental mathematical limitations exploitable through deception, patience, and superior intelligence. They showed expensive missiles can be baited into destroying cheap decoys. They proved human psychology under stress is predictable. They confirmed weather conditions can be weaponized against electronic sensors. Most importantly, they established a new operational reality. Nowhere in Russia is truly safe anymore. Not the industrial heartland, not the naval bases, not the logistics hubs keeping the war machine functioning. The question now isn't whether Ukraine can strike deep into Russia. The question is what they'll choose to hit next, and whether Russian commanders can solve a defensive equation that appears to have no solution. The mathematics are brutal. You cannot defend everything simultaneously when your adversary can choose to strike anything. That's not a tactical problem. That's a strategic catastrophe. And it was delivered by 48 drones, 24 of which were designed from the start to be sacrificed. Thank you for listening. Until next time, stay safe and take care. Goodbye for now.